Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for listening wherever you are and whatever platform you found us on. Now, today's topic is one that I know I've touched on with a lot of my guests, but I haven't really dedicated a whole episode to it, and it's a topic that is worth dedicating a whole episode to. So I know I have a lot of high school coaches who are listening, and to those who do coach high school, you all know that by the time your players get to you, they will most likely have had multiple coaches and have had multiple people who've guided them on their basketball journey. So knowing that, we know that a strong youth program can flow really nicely into those players being successful at a high school level. And on the other hand, we also know that a poor or a ill-run youth program could lead to a lot of reteaching and could also lead to players maybe losing their love and losing their passion for the game. And we definitely don't want that. So that's why we're going to talk about building a strong and successful youth program, as well as running successful youth camps to build your youth program, because those kind of go hand in hand with each other. And to do that, I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Erick Blasing. Coach, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. And like I said, this topic gets brought up here and there with a lot of the guests that I have, and so it's definitely one that's worth talking about and dedicating a whole episode to. So I'm looking forward to it. So, Coach, to get started, let's go ahead and get a little introduction into your coaching journey and where it's taking you, and then along the way how running camps or running youth programs has fit into that picture.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I love the angle that you're taking with your podcast in terms of connecting with, average coaches around, you always, especially during the pandemic here, I watched quite a few different coaching seminars online, and I'm sure a lot of people did, and you get some great nuggets out of those seminars, but a lot of times those coaches aren't necessarily high school coaches, or they're not average high school coaches. And so I think it's awesome that you're giving a voice to people that aren't on ESPN all the time. So I started actually coaching while I was in high school. I went to a private Christian school in Tomah, Wisconsin, and I was playing there in the way, I knew kind of my junior year of high school, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and so I was kind of interested. I loved working with youth and loved basketball. And thought it'd be kind of fun to maybe help out a little bit. And the way our school was structured, very small, and so the way it was structured is we had a middle school team, essentially like 6th through 9th grade, and then we had a varsity team, a high school team. And our practices were kind of offset. We played back-to-back games, and so it would work out that I could kind of help out. So my senior year of high school, I went down to help out, and it was myself and a buddy who was a junior in high school at that point. And what ended up happening, all of our coaches were volunteer parents for the most part, and the coach for this JV team wasn't a parent of a JV player anymore. And she'd coached a few years and decided that she wanted to kind of take a step back. And so it was myself as a senior in high school and my buddy as a junior in high school ended up being the head coaches of this JV team. And so we ran all the drills, we ran all the practices, we coached all the games. So we would coach a game, run to the locker room, talk to the team for 5 or 10 minutes, change over, and then go out and warm up for our varsity game. So it's a unique situation, unique league. And so I started out with a unique playing experience and coaching experience there. And so, at this Christian school I was at, I lost some of the opportunities. Like we weren't part of the WIAA, which is the Wisconsin High School Association. And so we weren't part of that. So we didn't get to participate in some of the tournaments and things like that, state tournaments. But I was able to gain some experiences coaching early on, and that kind of hooked me in, right? And so from there, I went and so I was there for 2 years. I coached the JV team for 2 years, and the next year after I graduated, actually, I stepped in as like an interim head coach for the varsity program because they had an opening, and I knew I wasn't going to stick around. I was going to go to college here, but I stayed home for a year and took some classes in the area and ended up staying and coaching there for 2 years. And so after that, I went to Maranatha, which is a private college in Watertown, Wisconsin. I played football there for a year, and while I was there, I knew I wanted to kind of keep coaching, so I assisted kind of right at the tail end of our season. It worked out. I was able to hop on as a middle school B team coach, and so I was coaching a middle school there in Watertown. Was there for a year, decided to transfer, and went to University of Wisconsin La Crosse, which is a 4-year school up here in Wisconsin. And so I went to UW La Crosse and knew I wanted to keep coaching, and kind of had a few connections in the area. And so I got on as a varsity assistant coach at La Crosse Central High School on the girls' side. So it was my first experience coaching girls. And I was there for 2 years, and we were a decently sized high school. We're about 1,200, a little over 1,200 students. At that point, Wisconsin had 4 divisions, so we were Division I, which was the biggest. And so we had a little success, won playoff games each year. We defeated the number 1 ranked team in our section, like top 5 team in the state, as an 8 seed in the playoffs, and won a regional final on the road at their place. So we had a little success. We had a lead with about 3 minutes to go in a sectional semifinal with a chance to, put ourselves 1 win away from state. And as all coaches, I'm sure you have those games that you remember. We turned it over. We missed a couple shots, and we lost our lead and ended up losing that sectional semifinal to the team that would eventually go to state. And so had a little success there. Was there for 2 years. Head coach decided to step down, and so I was kind of looking around for different jobs, interviewed at a couple different places, and was selected as the head varsity coach on the boys' side at Sparta High School. And so Sparta's a town of about 8,000 people. It's about half an hour from La Crosse, so it's right in the western side of the state. So about 30 minutes from the Mississippi River, and high school of about 750 kids at that point. And so we were Division II, which is the second largest division, but very small. Division II was running about like 600 to 1,200 was kind of the range of schools. So we were on the bottom end of that, in a very, very tough conference. And so I was young. I was about 22 years old when I got the job. And, you step in at 22, I coached for, I'd been coaching for a few years. I went to a ton of clinics, ton of camps. I was working a ton of summer camps and connecting with coaches, and stepped in and to a program that wasn't particularly successful. They had a lot of success a decent amount of success in the 70s, a lot of success in the 80s. They had 1 winning season. So I took over in 2011. They had 1 winning season since about 1990. They had, I think, 2 or 3 other seasons where they had gotten to 10 wins, but they weren't winning seasons. And so it was a program that was not seeing success. And it was in a very tough conference. It was kind of a metro. La Crosse area is about 90,000 people, probably roughly in terms of the metro, with La Crosse and a couple surrounding cities. And we were about a half an hour out of that. So it's, a metro conference, and it was a tough area. We had some great kids, decent athletes, but not committed, basketball players necessarily, right? They didn't put in the time, and so skill development was a premium, and I learned real quick, mainly through trial and error, and failing at a couple different things, that we have to really put a premium on the youth program and on that. And so I was there at Sparta for 4 years, and then I wasn't teaching. I graduated. I was still an undergrad when I started. So I graduated, worked for a couple of years in the area, and then I wasn't teaching yet. I wanted to be a teacher, and so moved to Baraboo, Wisconsin, which is about 45 minutes north of Madison. And so I was a varsity assistant coach on the boys' side for my first year in Baraboo. There's a little 2-year college here in town, University of Wisconsin. It's now it's called University of Wisconsin Platteville at Baraboo, Sauk County. So it's part of Platteville, which is another 4-year school here in the state. And so hopped on there and was a assistant coach for 3 years, kind of in a full-time role as the assistant coach. I mean, I was teaching high school, but that was my main coaching role. And then last season, I kind of split. I helped out a little bit at the college and went back. They had a new head coach at the high school level who was a first-time head coach. So I know, I knew him a little bit, knew the AD a little bit, and I kind of got asked to help out a little bit and help guide him through that first year. And so this coming year, I'm actually transitioning out of the classroom from teaching to elementary principal role. So it's going to cut down my coaching ability, but I'm hoping to kind of help out a little bit between the high school and the junior college still, just to get my basketball fixed. So, it's been fun. I've learned a ton, and got a chance to work a bunch of camp coaching jobs. I worked, University of Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota State, Butler. I was at Butler when they were making their Final Four run, doing a summer camp, and actually sat down and talked for about 30 minutes one-on-one with Brad Stevens in his office.
Wow.
And worked at University of Iowa and a few other places too, and just had a kind of an interesting journey from my high school days. And we kind of talked about this before. I mean, in my high school league, small like parochial school kind of league around the state. I mean, I played in a cement floor gym because they couldn't afford to put wood in the floor yet. Played in the carpeted gym. My home games, I was a shooter, so and I was a decent player. I averaged about 15 points a game over my 2 years on varsity. Scored a little over 500 points, so I was okay. And I didn't have a 3-point line in my home games. The way we played in like a cafeteria of a elementary school, and so to go from that to be able to sit down and have a conversation with Brad Stevens was kind of surreal, and to be able to run my own program at an early age was an experience that definitely developed me as a person, and so I'm excited to share a little bit about some of that today.
Well, yeah, just in your story of your basketball journey, it's taken you a lot of different places, and you've had exposure to a lot of different types of situations in your playing career and in your coaching career. And yeah, I can empathize with the carpeted gyms. I've coached games in gyms that have the carpet and everything like that. So I do know how that goes. And it's just really interesting how your journey can start one place, and then before you know it, you have this whole resume of all these different camps, all these different jobs, all these different positions that you've had, and all these experiences that you've built. And so to touch on that really quickly, I wanted to talk about that mobility that you've had and about the advancement that you've had into different coaching roles and what you have gained from coaching at different levels and what coaches would learn by being flexible in that sense, but also in coaching at camps and coaching at youth camps, skills camps, and what different experiences you got out of that and what a coach would learn by putting themselves in those situations as well.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, just kind of a side note, one of the best books I've read in terms of coaching especially is Gino Auriemma's autobiography. It's great. It's a pretty easy read. It's a good read, but just kind of talking about experiences. He came to the U.S. at like 6 or 8, something like that, and he couldn't speak English hardly at all. He had very little English language ability, and now he's running one of the most successful basketball programs of any level at any time. Like it's amazing where you can go. The game can take you in amazing places. So early on, my goal, when I started out coaching, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I kind of went a little bit backwards almost. I knew I wanted to be a teacher first, and then I decided I wanted to start coaching too. Sometimes, people kind of go that other route, which gives the teachers the bad rap, right? Because everybody knows, like, if you're a teacher and a coach, you don't just focus on coaching, right? You kind of get that sense in the media sometimes, but there's not very many coaches that are bad teachers. And so you have to be able to, to balance those things. So, but I knew when I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a coach. And then kind of as I started coaching, I really had the idea that maybe I could try to coach at college. I started, especially since I started doing a few camps and started meeting some different coaches and stuff from around the country. That kind of was a goal of mine to coach at the college level, wherever that was. And so a great way to do that, if that's something that you're interested in, a great way to do that is networking at camps, running summer camps, right? And there's a lot of young guys that are traveling the country every year, just working camp after camp after camp. You make a little money. They usually put you up. You usually get food with it. And so you can make it's a great summer job for a college kid or, right out of college. And it's a great way to network and get to meet people. I had the opportunity to work on a camp. I worked with Drew Hanlon, he's about my age, a little more successful than I am at the basketball level, but Drew Hanlon runs Pure Sweat, right? Works out NBA guys, and he was working a summer camp in Iowa when I was there, Snow Valley, Iowa, which is a great basketball school. Don Showalter is one of the big guys that runs it, and so he's a USA basketball developmental leader. And so it's amazing where you can go, these small little camps, and that camp is run, they get amazing names there that come and help out in that camp, and they run it at a small private D3 school in Iowa. And so if you're looking to move up the ranks, putting yourself out, working camps like that, you're going to meet people from all around the country, wherever you're at. And it's going to not only help you network, but it's also going to, kind of expand your boundaries a little bit and kind of, see what else is out there and what other experiences people have. In terms of my career, I've had the opportunity to coach a little bit here at the junior college level. So I got a taste of what that's like, in a very low pressure setting. That was kind of one thing that I got married, like 24, so fairly early. And so some coaches, and their wives know that's what they want to do. And they're going to travel, and you have to really be willing to work for free, or virtually for free, right? I can tell you tons of stories of coaches I know that are at the Division I level or JUCO level or NBA level that started out and they would essentially work for free, right? And so, for me, my journey changed a little bit, and I made the decision that I wanted to try to coach at the college level, but I wasn't comfortable putting my family through constant moves, the risk of losing your job. I think the pandemic now is kind of put an extra focus on that because there's a lot of schools that are closing or cutting athletics due to this that you wouldn't expect. And so, I kind of pulled back my ambitious goals a little bit, and I was still, fortunate enough, I was able to coach at the college level and still coach a little bit at the college level, even though it's, a non-scholarship small junior college here, but get a little taste of it, right? Yeah. And so, there's a lot of great things. If you're looking to move up, learning how to do photo editing is a huge one. I did some video coordination for the football program. EW Lacrosse was an undergrad there. I helped out running their film a little bit, just because I want to get experience with some of the video editing pieces, because that's key when you're looking for entry-level jobs in the college game. Email coaches, write letters, just ask. It's amazing how many doors will open for you if you just ask, and you'd be like, that guy, that coach, that person doesn't have time to respond, and they do sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so if you send a letter to Gino Oriema, he might write you back. He might give you a call back, and it might be a foot in the door. So don't be afraid to go on a limb in that, and just understand where you are in life, what your comfort level is. Some coaches and their families, they move and they're okay with that, and if that's your comfort level, you're going to have a little bit more mobility than someone who isn't willing to do those things. But wherever you're at, I think we'll kind of come back to this a little bit later. But one thing I always made sure is wherever I was at, is I wanted to make sure that it was the big time, essentially, right? And so whether I was coaching at the high school level as a head coach at the high school level, or I was assistant coach, this tiny little junior college, right? I invested in it like it was the Division I school, right? And make sure my players knew that I was invested totally in the program. And we, tried to give them extra perks, maybe of, gear, food, or whatever the case might be. And so as long as you do that, you're going to get more out of it as a coach. Your players are going to get more out of it, and those relationships that you're developing with your players and your fellow coaches, those are going to be the rewarding things, even though maybe you're not at the level that you hope to be at in terms of development. As a person, as a player, you're going to still get a lot out of it.
Well, a couple things that I can definitely back up that you said as somebody who took his first job moving halfway across the country, because I didn't have anything that was tying me, with in regards to having to incorporate other people in my decision. When I made that move when I was 22 and I had nothing else really going on, and I had the freedom and flexibility to take that job. And so I did. And it's a really good point that you mentioned. As you get maybe older, your life situation's a little different, you're including family members, you're including loved ones, and then there's other things that factor in it. But if you do have the mobility, or you do have the support from those around you to go and take that job and get your foot in the door, absolutely 100% agree with that. And another thing too that you brought up, which I think is so true, is that when you just dive in, whether it's in a camp, whether it's in a new coaching position, there's so much that you learn that isn't basketball related. There's so many other skills and so many other things that you pick up and you build along the way as you kind of build your coaching portfolio. And so absolutely, to reaffirm what you said, that if you are interested in coaching and you have the flexibility and you're really passionate about doing it, just see what's out there. And like you said, you'll be really surprised sometimes at how many doors will open as long as you just ask and as long as you just make it known how passionate you are about this, how much you want to be doing this. And even if it is a bigger program, so to speak, if you just ask, you never know what might open up for you. So 100% agree with all of that. So that's great. So we're going to focus today on talking about building a strong youth program. And I know within building your youth program, there's also the elements of the camps that you run and different things of that nature. So we're thinking about this in the perspective of maybe a high school coach who's looking at their youth program, trying to figure out about the players that they have coming up to them. So to start in a very broad sense, in your opinion, what makes a youth program a successful one? For a new high school coach who's looking at their youth program, what are the things that they want to be looking for to examine their youth program and its effectiveness?
Yeah, so I think the first thing in terms of kind of looking, if you're stepping in, so first of all, do your research. Do your research when you're stepping into a job. And I've interviewed for a few different high school jobs. Gotten some, haven't gotten some. Every time though, you got to do your research. You got to understand what's the community like, what's the school like, and I've been in that situation where I've interviewed for jobs for communities I didn't live in or didn't really know that much about. And so, doing the research is really going to help you out. So like the last job that I interviewed for a head coaching job, I found the contact information for the youth basketball president, and I gave him a call, or emailed him, and we set up a time to talk and got a chance to kind of figure out what their priorities are, what the program looks like. So kind of having that background going into like an interview is going to help you understand that too, and just kind of know what your priorities need to be when you take over. So I think numbers is a huge thing. So if you look at a youth program and they're struggling and they're only getting, depending obviously on what the size of your community and the size of your school, but if they're only, getting a handful of kids in each grade level, that's something that you probably need to look into a little bit. If you feel like they should have more, right? Is there other programs that are competing for those kids? Are there people maybe in the programs that aren't making it enjoyable for the kids, so driving players away, or what's some reasoning there? So my experiences as a head coach and as an assistant coach at the high school level, for the most part, have been in single high school communities. Now, so the 2 years I was in lacrosse is a town of about 70,000 people. So we have 2 public high schools and a private high school. And so that one's a little bit different. In Sparta and in Baraboo, it's a single high school community. And so there's no one else drawing our kids away, right? So it's easier to create that pipeline and that path. So stepping into that program, I think the first thing you gotta have is a plan. You have to have a plan set up in advance and written down so that you know what you want, right? And so one of those first things is figuring out who's in charge. So in both instances that I've had with youth programs, there's a board of directors, or a governing body of some parents and maybe community members that are interested, that are kind of in charge of the program, right? And so that has different dynamics. I've been in an experience where they were really easy to work with, and an experience where they weren't really easy to work with, right? They're real kind of apprehensive. So I'll tell you, I guess Sparta. So in Sparta, I took over, and the program had the last 2 coaches had actually been there for a number of years. They were there for about 5 and 7 years, something like that, I think, respectively. So they had a little bit of continuity, but from the 1950s, because there's a history book about the program. So from the 1955 or so until today, they've had, I think, 19 coaches. And I'm tied for like 7th longest tenure. So there's a dozen coaches who didn't make it over 3 years.
Right.
And so as a youth program, rightly so, they're a little protective of the understanding that I might, as a coach, they've had all this turnover, that they need to protect their program a little bit. So they might be a little leery of someone coming in. And I wasn't connected to the community. So that's, a piece too. And so once you kind of understand who's running it, that's going to be a dynamic you're going to have to deal with. Don't be, when I started out, my first 2 years, I was involved. I ran camps. We worked the girls program to run some, Saturday morning programs during the season. We ran summer camps. I went to the basketball youth club meetings that they had. They had monthly meetings. And so I was involved, but I wasn't invested, and I wasn't necessarily looking at ways to expand the program. So in Sparta, wrestling is huge, right? They did not have a lot of success in basketball for about 25 years. They didn't have a lot of success in football for about 25 years, but the wrestling program had consistently been successful. They either had individuals going to state, or they had a couple even team state runs. And so it was kind of a wrestling town. And, as a high school coach, I'm not necessarily losing athletes in high school, but I could be losing an athlete in kindergarten because they were starting their wrestling program at the kindergarten level. And at kindergarten, you can kind of wrestle, whereas at basketball is a little bit more difficult. And so my last 2 years, I started to invest in the program, which was one of my, kind of one of my regrets. Like, I wish I would have come in, and this, hindsight, you take over the first time as a head coach, your first year, you're going to make a ton of mistakes. And looking back, I wish I would have invested 2 years prior, because I think, it obviously would have made the program a little bit better. But my last 2 years, I invested in the youth program. We added fall camps, we added spring camps. We expanded. We didn't just go, start in third grade. We started with some kindergarten through eighth grade camps. We expanded our summer stuff. We ended up actually quadrupling the youth basketball skill opportunities that the kids had, and saw great success. I mean, parents are looking for things for their kids to do, and we made it accessible to them. I think I charged like $15 for like 4 nights, 4 different nights of camp. They got a T-shirt out of it. And so we made it priced where, there's a little bit of investment on the parents' part. They had to pay a little bit. It wasn't something that they just drop their kid off and leave. But we also made it accessible that, if, that community, both communities I lived in here, I mean, it's not a high poverty rate, but we're in like the 40% range in terms of like free and reduced lunch and stuff. Right. So there is quite a bit. And so making it, equitable for those families to access them, the skill instruction is huge as well. And then just kind of looking around and see what are some things that are available to you. You have eventually, after you've been there a few years, do you have some former players that can help out? Is there college kids in the area that can help you out? What kind of education you can provide to the parent coaches? So have that plan, going in. And so I kind of wrote down a few notes here for myself to just touch on some things. So what, kind of establish what grade level do you want to start at? So for us, it was important that we started at kindergarten, because the wrestling program started at kindergarten. And so if we can get kids opportunities earlier to get interested, they might do both for a few years, but then eventually maybe they'll pick basketball over wrestling if it's a good fit. And, that just gets us on our path to success a little bit quicker. In a program I took over, so they had won one game. The varsity team had won one game the previous season before I got there. Again, they only had one winning season. They had like 3 double-digit wins seasons, but not winning seasons in like the last 20 years. And so, if you step into a program like that, in my opinion, I think you have to look at it as like a decade project. And it might not take you that long, but, kind of step into it with the idea that you're going to start with your second, third, and fourth graders, really hammer skills. And then in the, 7, 8, 9 years it takes them to get into high school, at that point, you're going to have a really solid program, hopefully. And so that starts at that youth level. One thing I did right away is I did kind of establish a checklist of what I want from each grade level, right? And so share this out with your youth coaches. What are the, it doesn't need to be a ton, but what are the half a dozen, 10 skills that you want each player to know in first grade or second grade or, third grade, and kind of work it up and progress it, right? So in first grade, maybe they're only able to, dribble kind of with their head up, and then maybe by, the next year they're able to cross it over or do another, change of direction move with their head up, right? And just kind of, build that up by each grade level. And as your kids get a little bit more skilled, establish what type of drills and offenses and stuff that you want your program to run, your youth program to run, and share those out, put them on paper. Now it's so easy with like YouTube and, different video formats that you could really not just have it on paper, but actually show it in a video and share that out with the youth coaches. I created a guide each year of, here's some drills that we want to make sure we're running. I had the checklist in there, right? Here's what we want the kids to know in each grade level. Here's the drills that we want them running. Here's some, a couple things that offensively or defensively that we do at the high school that would be something that they could do at the youth level. And then one thing I established here when I stepped in to help out in Baraboo last year for a new coach is we put together MPGs is what I called them, but measurable player growth. And so we created a sheet with I think I had about 5 different drills on there. So like a mic and drill, just like a right hand layup, left hand layup from the elbow, just some drills that we timed, and we set a little time limit to them. And then we asked the players, the youth coaches, to do it various points throughout their youth season, run these drills, and then write down the players' score. So if they could get 10 right-handed layups in a minute, next time our goal is to try to get 11 or 12 right-handed layups in a minute. And then that sheet, the idea is that sheet is individualized for each player, and that team's binder can really get just passed on to the next grade level. So whether that coach stays with them or not, the hope would be that you could kind of have an idea and see some growth through your players year over year.
Yeah.
And it's not just, I think in education, we're very data focused and very, making sure we're keeping up on student data. And I think as a coach, especially now, it does the more that you can have actual data to back up your decisions as a coach, and to help you guide your instruction of your players is just going to help you out, right? It's just going to help you out a little bit.
Well, there's a couple of things that really stuck out to me that you mentioned. First off is that if you are a new coach that is stepping in, there isn't necessarily going to be some built-in trust by the community members at the younger level, especially if you're not a member of that community. They're not going to know who you are. They're not necessarily going to trust what you're going to say, especially if they've gone through many high school coaches. And so I think it is really important that a high school coach really makes it known how invested they are and how much they care about the youth and their youth program and the players that are going to be in there. And another part that you mentioned, which I also think is really important when assessing your community, is understanding that if basketball isn't necessarily the strongest sport in the area, is realizing what sport is and what are maybe they doing at the youth level, and understanding that if, like you said, wrestling starting at kindergarten, you probably need to start at kindergarten too, and understand that you're, in a sense, you are competing. Obviously, we want players, most coaches want players to do multiple sports, but we want to make sure that we're putting that love of the game in our players. And then something else too that you alluded to is that you want to build that youth program, but it's going to take time for it to see results. And by the time that it does see those results, you may not be the coach there anymore, but that's okay. And like, you have to be okay with that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like stocks. It's kind of like, you invest in some stocks, and sometimes they're going to pay off and sometimes they're not, but most likely whether your stocks work or not, it's a few years, right? It takes some time to get there. You're investing. And yeah, I think that's where you kind of have to look at it, that you're giving, you're kind of giving back to the game a little bit. Like you're setting up future players for success, and hopefully, maybe they're your players, maybe they're somebody else's, but you're investing in them. And that's where I think you got to make it a little bit more outside of basketball. So, with all of our youth stuff, we try very hard to make it growth mindset or process driven, right? And that, like when I was running, we ran some summer or some spring camps and stuff last year. And we did a little youth league that I kind of took over and ran for the youth, for the program here. And so I led the drills and the practices and stuff. And I made sure to be very intentional with all those, to talk to the players, second, third grade, that, hey, it's okay to fail, right? We're here to get better. We're not here to, obviously you're not going to have success the moment you step on the court if it's something that you haven't tried, right? And so, we would do some maybe more difficult type of skill development drill, 2-ball handling, right? 2-ball drills and stuff like that would be tougher for them. One, to to get them a little bit used to that and to try to get them a little bit better coordination and things like that. But two, also to give them something that they're not going to be very good at. So that way we can hammer the point that it's okay to fail, and that we're here to get better, and we're here as a team to get better, and encourage your teammates, and your coaches are going to encourage you, and you work hard. And if it's something you're not very good at, then that's something to work harder at. And so those type of skills, if you're no longer the coach down the road, if you've done a good job of laying in those type of resiliency skills and things like that, that's going to benefit those kids,
Right.
Which is ultimately our goal as a teacher and a coach.
Well, that brings up the other point then for coaches to consider, and I think most of them do. I think most of them are aware of this, but you definitely don't want to be trying to install like your offense or your defense into like your first or second graders for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But understanding that they just need the general skill set, right? And if they have that general skill set, in theory, they should be able to apply that into any system that they're get put in when they get into high school.
Yeah. So yeah, we focused on, my numbers are a little off here, but ballpark, I've heard this before. In Europe, they run, it's like almost like 4-to-1, right? They almost do 4-to-1 ratio of skill development to games played. And in the United States here, it's almost the opposite. We're like 1-to-4. It's like,
Yeah.
we play a ton of AAU games, or we play a ton of tournament. When you have a youth tournament up here, anyway, how it works with our youth teams is it's mostly parent volunteers, and they'll practice 1 to 2 nights a week, and then they go play a Saturday tournament where they're playing like 5 games. And so they've played 5 games so they've spent 5 to 6 hours probably playing basketball on a Saturday compared to 3 hours of practice time during the week. And so, that's a little bit backwards than what it should be. And so that's where, as a head coach, you identify some of those skills that you want to teach. Please don't run zone defense at the youth level, because your players, even if you are a very good zone team at the high school level, and that's all you're ever going to run, at some point you have to learn how to guard your man, even if it's within a zone. And so, teaching them how to play those spatial concepts that take a little while for kids to understand, if you can get that, at the younger levels is huge. And so we always focused on ball handling. We did a lot of different things, all positions, all grades. So if you have a 6'2" 5th grader, he needs to learn how to handle the ball because he may stop growing, right?
Yep.
And so, we did tennis ball work. We did 2-ball drills. As they get a little bit older, you could even incorporate like 1-on-2 drills to get them to be able to handle the ball and keep their head up, right? Cone drills, things that are going to help them get their head up, be able to see the floor and be able to make some decisions. We focused a lot on shooting. We worked on form all the time, form shooting. We were fortunate in Sparta. We were fortunate that we had some hoops that were lower, so they would like hook on to the rim of the main basket. There were these little tiny hoops, and they could be lowered though. They brought the rim down to like the 8-foot level. And so for K2, that's huge because kindergartners want to shoot the ball too, and they can't very well. So we used smaller basketballs. We had lower hoops. Really, even 3rd grade, you probably should still have the hoop a little bit lower. Although I know in most youth leagues, at least in our area, that they play on a 10-foot hoop even in 3rd grade, which is still really not developmentally appropriate. So if you can get access to lower hoops, that's gonna help really hammer footwork. That's one thing kids definitely are learning a new skill, and so getting that footwork down is going to be huge. And then as a coach, just kind of figure out your form goal, right? What do you want your kids' shots to look like, and research it, right? Research is that you have a solid concept. And then just kind of continually hammer that over and over and over, so that way each grade level, if you're always constantly teaching them the same form and kind of using those sound bites, coaching sound bites. So give them quick little things, like beef. Everyone's probably heard of beef, right? And so, giving those quick little things where they can check their form in an easy to remember way, and it's consistent in every grade level. So they hear it in 2nd grade, they hear it again in 3rd grade, 4th grade. Then you'll hopefully see some consistency over time. And then ultimately, like the most frustrating part, probably, that if you're coaching now, you understand this. If they can consistently make a shot in a game, so in a game setting, if your players are consistently hitting shots, so probably whatever you want to set that at, 60%, 70%, and they have terrible form, you may have to let it go. You may just have to be okay with that player's form not being great, but they hit 60%, 70% of their shots. Every player's is a little bit different, and so their form might look a little bit different. But in a game setting, if they can do that. Now, if you have a kid that has not very good form and they tell you that they can shoot 60 or 70% spot shooting in practice, but then in a game they only shoot 30%, that's a situation where you probably need to, again, have that data, as the kids get older, have that data that you can show them a little bit. And you probably want to address some of that shooting form, but,
Right.
Focus on trying to teach those decision-making skills. Like you said, I always shared some stuff that we did offensively and defensively with our youth coaches, but I didn't require it. There was a couple things that we'd say, hey, we'd like, learn how to, do some motion, pass and cut, pass and screen, some of these types of concepts that we want to do, but it was teaching them decision-making skills and teaching them concepts and not X's and O's. Because you want them to be able to make those plays. Because at some point you're going to get in a situation where you don't have a timeout and it's a tie game or you're down by one and you need your players to be able to make decisions when they can't necessarily run a set or they don't run it right.
Yeah, 100% agree with that, and just getting them the skill set. And I think that in general, when players at a youth level are playing those games and even up to middle school, like the wins aren't that important. Like you'll sacrifice, a win in fourth grade for development of the right skills and the right basketball knowledge. And so I 100% agree with that. And so speaking of that, your answer made me think of something about those youth programs who maybe they have a practice a week and then they maybe play a game or so on the weekend, and there's a whole wide array of coaches, and usually it's just parent volunteers. And so in your experience in working with youth programs, is there a lot of work that you did with those coaches at the youth level, understanding that their own basketball knowledge may be somewhat limited, or do you just kind of let them do what they need to do, understanding that you might give them like a little bit of guidance, but it's ultimately like do the best you can and thank you for even doing this in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a fine line. That's a very fine line. And that's where I think the more established you are as you get into the program, I think early on if you're someone that's stepping into a role where you're not already a part of the community or already a part of that program, it looks a little bit different. If you've been an assistant coach in the program for 10 years, then that's a little bit different. But, using my example, I stepped into a head coaching role for a community that I was familiar with because I lived in the area, but I wasn't from the community. And so in that instance, the first year or two, you probably just have to make the best of what you have. As you get more invested, then I think you have more opportunities to look and see, okay, this parents, they're volunteering their time. That's awesome. That they're trying, but I have an ex-player now. I have there's a college in town and there's college kids that are looking to get into coaching, and there's different avenues that I could tap into to maybe find someone better, maybe not to replace this other coach, but maybe to pair with them, right, and give them some support. Or as you learn about, there's going to be former coaches in the community that coached at maybe the JV level or the freshman level that aren't coaching anymore, different things like that. So I always put together a youth program, essentially, a manual for the coaches, and said, hey, by grade level, this is the skills we want to do. Here's a bunch of drills that address those skills. Offensively, my last couple of years, I did share with them like a read and react program as an offensive system. Basically, it's 5-out motion, and it can be run 5-out, 4-out, 3-out. It doesn't matter, but there are set rules in the motion on pass and cut, some screening rules and things like that, just to help kids make decisions. And so very loose in terms of specific guidance, but some offensive guidance for them. We did coaches clinics, and so have them come into a practice, had them come into a practice and kind of watch some things, and setting up that practice to be very skill specific, right? So it wasn't just a regular practice, right? We had our players running specific skill type drills that we could show the coaches. Here's what it looks like in the live fashion. You could do that live, right? Or you could video it now. With YouTube and all that, it's so easy. You could film that. I started that a little bit, never really I didn't really invest the time into it as much as I could have. And so if you have the time, get with your players in the summertime or early in the season, help, have them help you film some of the drills and things like that, and share those with your youth coaches. A lot of times now teams even have, you have websites, or the youth teams have websites now, and with like Sports Engine or whatever platforms you're using, you can have restricted access pages in your website where the coaches could sign in, and you could share all that to them in a website format that they could access at any time too. But yet it's kind of password protected, so everyone can't come in and see your stuff.
Right.
So there's a lot of great options for that, out there now. Ultimately, I think you just have to look kind of what your situation is, and remember that even your parent coaches, they really just want what's best for the team and for their kids, even though it doesn't always come off that way.
Yeah.
And so try to have that empathetic mindset and kind of try to put yourself in your shoes, because it's pretty easy to not do that. And so you just have to understand that parents, and deal with this with your high school players, parents kind of lose sight a little bit of what's going on when it comes to their kids in sports. Some parents, right? Not all parents, but some parents do. And so that's where you just have to try to step back and make what's the best decision for the program.
Well, I think that's really important to keep in mind too, especially if you do have parents who are, gracious enough in giving up their time to coach, and maybe they're coaching because their child is on one of these youth teams. Well, that parent's perspective may be that they're coaching because they want to be around, their son or daughter, and they enjoy it that way, but they're not necessarily looking like big picture about the high school program, and don't necessarily have the investment to the level that a high school coach would. They're just there to rightfully support their son or daughter and be around them more. And basketball is just one of the things that they get to do in order to spend more time with their child. And so you're absolutely right about building those relationships and making sure that you're walking that fine line, like you mentioned, and really just getting to know your parents and getting to know the members of the community. And with that, I'm kind of tying in two questions here at once. One of the things that I think is a challenge, but it's a really awesome challenge to conquer, is making your camps and making your youth program fun and enjoyable, to where players want to continue to come back, and at the same time growing that program and promoting that camp so that the word gets out to others. And so I'm going to tie both in together. In your experience, what keeps players, especially at a young age, coming back year to year, and how can a coach kind of promote that camp and promote their program, in a sense, their youth program, so that the word gets out and that people know that this is an awesome, enjoyable experience that you'll also get to learn about basketball as well?
Yeah, no, great question. So the first thing I think you have to really get across to your youth program when you take over is that from kindergarten through JV level, wins don't matter, right? And and you have to phrase it maybe a little bit different, because that turns people off. But wins don't matter at fifth grade, because I've been around a lot of programs and I've seen a lot of programs, either been a part of them or talked to other coaches who've had them, right, where their parents just boast about, man, we won fifth grade tournaments, or we won 5 fifth grade tournaments, but we only lost 1 fifth grade tournament, right? And then they get to the high school level and their teams aren't very good. And ultimately your job at the youth level is to get them better with the skills that they need to become a successful varsity player. You want to give them some life skills, some resiliency, and just some trying different things, right, and communication and cooperation, all these types of things. And then also, ultimately they need to have fun, right? They just need to have fun. And we've hurt ourselves a little bit in our society, in that we've structured a lot of play instead of just letting kids have free time to go play. And so they need to have fun. And so up through, especially middle school, once you get into high school, it's a little bit different, but up through 7th grade, 8th grade, the kids need to have fun. And so as a head coach stepping in, I think the first communication that you have to have with your youth levels, that our job here is to build successful young people. And, we need to build them to be successful at the basketball court and in life. And so we want them to have some fun. And so in terms of leading that personally, is enthusiasm, right? Kids love it. I'm a high school teacher. I had to train myself to be enthusiastic in terms of like an elementary level camp, right? And you have to be okay with kind of making a fool of yourself and just being exciting and, just bringing a lot more energy, right? Just having a little bit more fun, right? Don't take yourself so seriously. And so that took a little bit of work for me to do, because it's just a little bit different than what I was used to. And so, that's the first thing is, being enthusiastic, coming at the players with a fun attitude. Make it competitive. Kids, even in kindergarten, they're competitive. And so, have your dribble skill work include relays, or maybe time, maybe how many good crossovers can you do in 15 seconds, right? Or whatever you want to do, be creative and make up some competitions that incorporate your skill development too.
Right.
Same thing with shooting, first to 10 at this basket, right? And then it's a team relay, and so different things that you can do like that, right? Help kind of make it more fun. It's not, you're not just dribbling to dribble, right? And you're not just doing some kind of boring, right, from the kids' perspective, boring drill that is really important. But if you can find a way to make it more competitive, to even make it more game-like, bring in some of those decision-making skills, and give the players a little bit more competitive atmosphere, that they will like that. And then also, I think you do have to be honest with the kids, even in first, second grade, and let them know that sometimes everything you do in basketball practice isn't going to necessarily be your favorite or fun, but you have to do, you have to get better at this, so that way you can be better in the game. And I think if you, constantly reinforce those things and say it's okay to fail, that it, teach that resiliency skill and things like that, that's gonna pay off. Getting your players involved. So at the high school level, having your high school players involved, coming to camps, coming to these youth practices and helping out is huge, right? The kids love it. They're rock stars. They think they're in the NBA. And so that's big. We did an in-house league. We started here in Baraboo last year. So we played 3-on-3 games for our third and fourth graders and 5-on-5 for the fifth and sixth graders. And we had our players kind of help out as like coaches for the teams. They helped out with our practices. They helped out kind of coach some of the teams. They reffed a little bit. And so the players love seeing them. The youth kids love seeing the players at those things. And that kind of answers your second question a little bit too. It kind of helps promote yourself in the community. And so, if the more you invest and spend time in your youth program, those parents are going to understand that you care and that you're invested in their kids and the program. And they are going to be on your side, most likely, they're going to be on your side for a while, right? And then eventually they're going to get into high school and you're not going to play their kid, and they're going to hate you. But you can buy a little time by really investing in their kids and showing them that you do care about their son or daughter, even though they're in fourth grade, right? And you don't directly coach them. And so in terms of promoting yourself in the community, being visible, branding is big. I'm a big kind of logo guy, so I want to create, if there isn't already a logo, create one, or take the logo that's there and maybe tweak it a little bit to be very boys basketball, girls basketball specific. That's your team logo. And so having that social media presence, maybe, setting up a YouTube channel to share out with the community, and having your players help out. The youth thing is big. We always did a poster night and have the kids, it was like youth basketball night, and they come to the game, and then the varsity players are signing posters after the game, right? They love that stuff. We had ball boys and ball girls. So they came and visited the locker room, got to be part of the warm-ups, right? They sat in the bench with us a little bit. We took a picture of it. So, we took a picture of the varsity team with our ball boys that night, and then that went out on social media. And so, we connected that with our youth program. So we're working with our youth coaches to help get kids signed up for this. Doing community service projects, right? So, leaf removal for people up here, snow removal, snow shoveling. I know like our football team goes around and shovels some after big snows. connecting with the elementary schools for tutoring. So one thing, my first job in Sparta when I was a head coach there, my first job out of college was running an after-school program. And so that was my full-time job. And so even actually before I got that job, but definitely once I took over the the after-school program, we set up a court to class, we called it, and we had our kids come in and help tutor a couple days a week at this after-school program. And you could do that during the school day, maybe get a chance to, get your kids out of school and go read to an elementary school class and those type of things. Those are all things that not only they help your players and they help your youth, but that it looks really good in the community, right? And so, you're teaching your players to give back and become part of the community, and all that stuff just, also helps the community show that you're invested in them.
Yeah, no, that's some really great advice, in that if you really want to build your youth program, you really need to be visible in so many ways just outside of basketball, of the things that you do, or just be really creative in what you do. Like you mentioned about bringing in your players, or having the youth players come and see your players play in some regard. I think that that's really important, in that there's so many things for younger kids to be doing. There's so many things for their parents to get them involved in. And in a sense, you really have to promote yourself really well to a parent, to have them understand that, hey, this basketball camp that we're doing is worth your time, and that you are going to get something out of this, and it's going to be a really enjoyable experience that you want to continue to come back to. And I feel like it could sound almost like competitive, in that, you're competing maybe in your case with like wrestling or baseball or soccer, and then basketball and all of these things. But you almost, it sounds like you have to kind of separate yourself in some way, and almost present what you're doing as, you're going to get this here, and whether you implicitly or explicitly state it, you're not going to get this through this other experience. Is that kind of correct in that way of thinking?
Yeah. So I mean, when you kind of lay it out, like I kind of lay it out business like, right? So it sounds a little disingenuous, but so your foundation has to be the correct thing. So you really have to be investing. So I always strive to do a ton of leadership development, and like intentional non-basketball leadership lessons, activities, development type things that we did with our varsity team. And so that was our foundation. And so my goal was to get more athletes to be a part of those things that are going to help them off the court. Because ultimately, the basketball, even at the varsity level, right, winning doesn't matter. How many state championships you have ultimately doesn't matter if you're not developing your players to be better people. And so that has to be your foundation. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of marketing to it. So you do want to, I wouldn't advise anybody to directly compete with another program in your school, like openly, but you do want to, let them know that, hey, we're teaching our people to be better players. We're also teaching them to be better people. And, we have fun, we have a community connection that we're sharing with each other, and we really want you to be a part of our program. And just kind of showing those things helps to build that too. And then you do want to do a little promotion. You do want to get, a little bit of your logo out there, and get people talking about your program in positive ways.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. And that word of mouth spread is so key, because when other people are saying how effective your program is, or how great of an experience it is, I feel like that's the best form of marketing. And so I want to talk really quickly about something on the court for coaches to keep in mind, because I know many coaches may not have a lot of experience working with youth, or working with kids at a really young level. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, for that coach who may be working with kindergartners, first graders, second graders for the first time, what are they going to find in terms of teaching things maybe on the court that are going to maybe be a lot more difficult than they thought, because they're like, oh, I didn't realize that, this would take so much time. But, it may have been a while for coaches who have, maybe they've never worked with kids at that level. So I'm just curious your thoughts on what the learning curve might be for things on the court.
Get as much help as you can and break up your group as much as possible. So like K2 especially, right? So I'm trying to think back. Our numbers were probably 30 to 40 kindergartner K2 kids in our little camps that we started running. So we had really good response. And I had, myself as a head coach, I had at least a couple of my assistant coaches there or JV coaches, and then as many players as I could get. Now, the difficult thing is a lot of times you're doing these camps out of season, right? So you're doing like we did spring and fall and stuff. And so it takes a little coercion maybe, to get some of your players there because they're already involved in other sports or there are other things going on. But if you can get as many of your players there and have your other coaches there, part of it, that helps because you kind of divide and conquer a little bit. With the kindergarten through first grade for sure, and I'd even say maybe second grade too, I didn't spend a ton of time. I really capped it. I felt like 30 minutes is a little too short. Mm-hmm. An hour is a little too long though. So we kind of went about 45 minutes. But I would say you could do an hour. 45 minutes to an hour is plenty of time in a gym for a kindergarten through second grade. And you need to keep it moving. So I wouldn't, you don't spend more than a few minutes, 5 minutes probably max on any one drill. Maybe you're doing this, similar things. Maybe you do ball handling for 15 minutes, but every 3 or 4 minutes you're changing up how you're doing ball handling to keep that attention going for the kids. And that kind of comes back into keeping it fun, right? You're not doing a monotonous drill for 10 minutes because, that's not going to be fun for a 6-year-old. And so, having that, that variety in your drills, maybe you're still teaching the same skill, but you're having some variety in how you're going about teaching it. The biggest thing is explanation, right? So at the K2 level, you bring your kids together, have them sit down and really kind of run it. The good thing K2 is they have some experience in the classroom, so you can kind of draw on that and really teach it like a classroom setting. So you were going to demonstrate the new drill. You're going to have all your kids come to the hoop. They can sit down, right, and explain to them or model for them that they're keeping their thoughts to themselves. If they have a question, they raise their hand, right, and those type of things. And so as you demonstrate the drill, you can kind of explain it to them, but you have to be very explicit in how you explain it to them, and then have someone demonstrate so that they can see what you want them to do, and kind of reinforce it that way. Because if you just come out and say, hey, we're going to do this, and if you explain the drill like you're explaining it to your 10th grade team, they aren't going to understand what you're doing. So you have to be very explicit with it. And ultimately just be enthusiastic. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing is be outside of yourself. If you're not an enthusiast, kind of an extroverted type person. I'm not very extroverted, so if you're not an extroverted type person, it takes a little effort maybe to get yourself out of that comfort zone. But having that energy and enthusiasm is going to be huge. And then just having realistic expectations. If you don't have low hoops, if you don't have the access to smaller basketballs than like a men's size basketball, if you're on the boys side, being able to get access to lower hoops or smaller basketballs is going to help. If you don't have it, then just have expectations that your kids aren't gonna. Your shooting is going to be a lot tougher at K2 if you're shooting on a 10-foot hoop, and their ball handling is going to be a lot tougher if they're having to use a full size basketball.
Well, I really appreciate that you reemphasize the enthusiasm aspect, because really that's just so important, is that you're having fun and that the kids are having fun, and that you don't necessarily look maybe at times as to what you're doing with your kindergartners or your first graders or your really young ones is necessarily like crucial skill development, but more so like getting them invested into wanting to play basketball and to keep playing basketball and just being in love with the game and being interested in it, because there's so many, like I mentioned earlier, there's just so many opportunities and things for really, really young players to get involved in. And so to have them be able to associate basketball with this like fun, exciting, enjoyable experience, I think then the skills will come, and the investment in learning those skills hopefully will come if that enthusiasm and if that excitement is already built in. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of tying it back to the promotion thing too, is always have something, if you can, if you're running a camp or a skill development session or something like that, always have something that the kids can take with your logo on it, right? Because that kind of helps build in your branding and get the kids excited. So, I mean, T-shirts are easy, right? T-shirts are an easy way. They're going to wear them to school. So if there's kids that aren't, or their friends that aren't into basketball and they see them wearing this cool shirt and they might ask them about this shirt, right? And then that's kind of a draw to get them into maybe having someone else join your program later on. Or we did water bottles one year. We did little sack packs one year. You know, there's tons of cheap options out there where you can brand it with your logo. It's something that the kids can use, and it's something that gets your logo out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that word of mouth promotion, and then the logo being visible and the logo being associated with your program or your camp is huge, and that's a huge piece to marketing and getting your name out there. Before we get into our concluding segment, Coach, I want to make sure that you got out any everything that you wanted to, or as much as you wanted to. So is there anything that I didn't address, or is there anything that you wanted to bring up about running a youth program or running youth camps that you really want to make sure our audience hears before I get into my concluding segment?
No, you know, I think the only thing I would kind of maybe add is it, you know, be invested in the youth program, and I think it's important as much as you can. So if you're in a single high school community, it's a little bit different than, you know, if you're in a multi-high school community, that looks a little bit different. But let's say you're in a single high school community, or even in a multi-high school city where you have direct feeders. I think it's your responsibility, even though it's a ton of time that it's not on the job description necessarily, and you don't get paid for it. But investing that and being visible in your program is only going to pay off for you. Even if it doesn't mean that you're getting, you know, more players, that commitment to the program is going to make, you know, those players feel that you are invested in their development before they ever get to you at the high school level. And so that's huge. And then just bringing in as many decision-making skills and drills into it, right? So playing 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 1-on-1. A drill I picked up this year actually with the coach I was assisting with. He had 1-on-1 blind, so the players started. The player on defense was facing the basket, you know, free throw line or wherever. The player on offense has the basketball, and the basketball is on the back of the player on defense. And so the offensive player pulls the basketball off the player's back, and as soon as the basketball is pulled off the defender's back, it's live. And so the defender has to now, you know, turn around and then react to those situations. And so, you know, even in kindergarten, first and second grade, it's going to take a little bit of training, but they can do that. They can play 2-on-2, they can play some 3-on-3, and, you know, building in those decision-making skills and just helping players learn how to play.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that those are all excellent points to bring up and excellent things to consider, especially because we're building, and everything that we're doing with building that youth program kind of builds on itself. So absolutely. Great. So Coach, to wrap up, what I want you to share is a coaching moment that you think that others listening would be able to learn from.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot. I'm sure anybody who's coached, you've got a lot of moments. You know, go with your gut in a timeout. Yeah, I always do that in the game. You're like, man, you only have a limited number of timeouts, right? And like, I don't want to burn it this early. And then, you know, sure enough, team hits another 3, and then, you know, you're like, I should have burned that timeout. But in terms of like bigger picture, I think don't just be involved, but be invested in your program. And since I'll kind of stick with youth since we're talking about it. So my first 2 years of my head coaching experience at Sparta, I was involved. I was at a ton of the youth stuff. I wasn't absent. I was there. I led it. But I was involved, but I wasn't invested. I wasn't looking for extra opportunities to create, you know, for our players. And so, you know, be invested in the program. And, you know, like we kind of talked about it, you may not be there when those players get up there. Mm-hmm. But even if you aren't, then, you know, you're going to have some pride. So I was there for 4 years. We didn't see a ton of on-court success. We got better. You know, in that league, we didn't get a chance to talk about it. In that league, I mean, we played against, there's 2 NBA players that came out that I was coaching against. There's probably a dozen Division I, either football or basketball players that we played against. And we didn't have any of that in our program. Some Major League Baseball players coming out of that league, right? So the skill level the teams that were playing was much higher than ours. So we got better skill-wise. We got better we became better basketball players. We didn't get the wins. I didn't get the instant gratification. But in the 6 years since I've been there, they've had a winning season. They've had a couple seasons where they got to 10 wins, and they started to see some of that success. And so, there's a lot of people that put a lot of time into it, but, I feel that my investment in their youth program at least helped to lay down the foundation to maybe turn the corner a bit for them, right? So even though I'm not there, I can at least take pride that we did the right things and we started down the right path. And one of my assistants is the head coach now, so he was a part of us doing some of that. And so, even though you're not there, being invested, it'll still pay off for you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just knowing that you're doing the right thing and knowing that you're coaching for the right reasons, because even not at the youth level, as a coach, even at a high school level, like, you never know where things are going to take you, and that you might end up with a new job that next year or something else might happen, and just knowing that you did the right thing. And so you put those foundations in place, or you built the team and you built the culture the way that you wanted to, whether it's at the youth level, middle school, high school level, so that at the end of the day, when you're done at that particular school, you can hold your head up high and just know that you did the right thing, and hopefully helped either continue a foundation of success or create one that will be a really positive impact for that school for years to come, long after you're gone. So yeah, 100% agree.
Absolutely.
That's great. And so to wrap up, Coach, I give every coach their 60-second soapbox to get out there, their final thought, final idea, closing message to our audience. So Coach, the floor is yours.
All right. Pressure. So I kind of was reflecting on this a little bit, and I think I wanted to come back to the point that we're developing people, not players, right? So whether you're at the high school level, middle school level, elementary level, we're developing people, not players. And so our investment has to be in developing those players to be better people outside of the game of basketball, right? Because ultimately the game of basketball doesn't matter. And so we are teaching those life skills that can help those people become, contributing citizens, hopefully future teachers, coaches, whatever the case might be, and that they have a good foundation, right? And so I always was very purposeful in teaching leadership skills and life lessons to my players, to the point that we did, we even did some slideshows on it. I've had them written down in my practice plan that we're talking about this today. And so, I want my players to be educated, to be reflective, and have a purpose in their life, right? And so kind of given where we are in terms of society at this point, summer of 2020, you're going to have players and situations that are going to come up regarding like the national anthem. And so if your players are kneeling or not kneeling because they saw it on TV, or it's just cool, that's not good enough, right? They need, as the coach and as the adult, it's your responsibility to guide them to the reasons why they're doing what they're doing, right? And ultimately, you may be the only invested adult in their lives that they listen to, right? Hopefully not, but you might be. And so, whatever stance your players might choose to take around a controversial issue, as long as they have thought out their reasons, and it's a thoughtful, well-reasoned approach, right? That's all that we can ask for. It doesn't necessarily it might not be something you agree with, but as long as it's an inclusive thought, and it's well-rounded, and it's well thought out, and the players understand why they're doing things, that's the best thing that you can get out of coaching and developing those relationships with your players. And then hopefully down the road, they'll come back to you and say, hey, Coach, I really appreciated you helping me think out these things, right? And so, whatever stance your players take in terms of, if it's social justice or even, things that aren't as large as that in our world, as the coach, teaching your players to be thoughtful and purposeful with their lives and what they do is going to serve them so much more value than anything you teach them on the court, especially in our world of instant communication and social media and things like that. So, don't forget that we're developing people, not players.
Yeah, it's a great thought and a great thing to keep in mind, especially because so many coaches on the court, myself included, want to have our players think about the decisions they're making on the court, why they're making that decision, and think about the implications of doing this or not doing this on the court, that it only makes sense that we would carry that same thought over to off the court decisions and off the court actions that our players make. And like you said, if they're informed, well thought out, and well reasoned, then whatever side we may fall on that issue is almost irrelevant, because at least they thought it through, and at least they're able to articulate why they're thinking the way that they are. And so, yeah, coaches, I think if you can create that environment where they're able to think and articulate for themselves, like on the court and off the court, we're doing our job and growing better people, exactly like you said. So yeah, that's great. So I want to thank you so much again for sharing some insight into coaching, and specifically in youth camps and youth programs. There's so many great ideas and so many things, especially for young coaches or new coaches who can kind of just jump in and try and make a positive impact, even if, you know, they're not going to be the ones who see the fruit of it. I hope that they all will, but there's just a lot of great ideas and a lot of great things that we can take from this moving forward. So Coach Blasing, I know that you're going to be doing the principalship now, so I know that the coaching isn't going to be as frequent, but hopefully you're going to get involved a little bit in a gym, or see a gym a little bit this year, and good luck with everything going forward.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit less. I'm going to try to find right now, you know, we're recording this before the school year is officially started, so right now in my head, I'll be able to carve out a little time here and there. I'm sure once we get into it, it's probably not going to be as easy as I think, but I'm definitely hoping to get my fix that way. So I'll throw out there too, my Twitter handle is at Coach Blasing, Blasing. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'll try to put together some stuff here as you release this podcast, and I'll be, you know, very willing to share any type of ideas, youth, you know, manuals, anything that I've done. Feel free. Very willing to share that out and take what you will from it, and just hit me up on Twitter, and I'll be willing to get back to you.
Awesome. I'll definitely make sure to include that. So thank you so much for that. And thank you guys so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.